apps. Yes. In this black screen, and can't, I think I have to end this in sharing, but anyway, um, Chargebacks 911, what they do is they, uh, oh, hi, Mark. You made it just in time. I'm glad you did. Chargebacks 911, they help merchants fight scams. So if consumer a consumer buys something, say these glasses from a company, and then they want to charge it back, but it's past the 30 days or whatever, Chargebacks 911 will help fight chargebacks, which hurt you because if you go above 1% chargebacks as a merchant, you could lose your credit card privileges. And that is part of the problem. That's very much part of the problem. And there we go. Okay, so Chargebacks 911. It's basically helped to fight chargebacks on credit cards if you're a merchant. Chargebacks are very bad to have. If you go above, like I said, if you go above 1%, you lose your ability to have merchant accounts with credit cards. You are out of business if you get too many chargebacks. So if you're a scammer selling something scammy, you're going to have a lot of consumers complain. And there was a lawsuit. Actually won a Federal Trade Commission action against Chargebacks 911. They're global e-trading doing business as Chargebacks 911. Gary Cardone and Monica Eaton. They're the co-founders of Chargebacks 911. They were sued by the Federal Trade Commission, and basically, I covered this before, but I'll just quickly share it again. And thank you for standing by when I had those technical difficulties, which were not my fault. They were Brendana's fault. Hello, Lupita. Welcome to the show. We covered this before in the past, but basically, in happier days, that's Gary Cardone, Grant Cardone's twin brother, and his ex-wife, Monica Eaton, who I said is not a Scientologist. And hasn't been one since like 2007. She does not donate money. They were facing a civil RICO lawsuit. And to get to RICO, you have to have predicate acts of crime. And this is the case. Let me go to this. Anyway, they were facing a lawsuit, and it's a pretty heavy lawsuit. This is the caption if you want to look it up. I'm going to post the final result, the final filing. The case has been settled, but it wasn't settled before there's some damage was done, I think, in my opinion. But it was Janet Seiler individually on behalf of all others similarly situated. This is a class action. Charlene Bavinkoff against Global E-Trading, doing business as Chargebacks 911. So this was the case. And basically the essence of the case was that Chargebacks 911, Chargebacks 911, they helped scammers selling a keto diet product. They helped them sell it online. And basically what they did is the scammers would sell a keto diet supplement that was a bullshit product. People would complain because they would get auto subscriptions, they would get auto renews, all kinds of stuff. They would want to charge back, which would push their chargebacks above 1%, and that could risk their credit card accounts. So Chargebacks 911 did what were called microtransactions, thousands of them. And these scammers had hundreds of companies. And so Chargebacks 911 would do something called load balancing. So they would do offsetting microtransactions, which are refunds, tiny little refunds, to keep the chargebacks under 1%. So if I have 1,000 chargebacks, which pushes me to say 10%, well, then Chargebacks 911 could do 978 microtransactions that would offset the fraud I was engaged in, and keep my accounts. And they would do this by shifting across all the companies I owned. So that's called load balancing, part of what they were allegedly doing. And the lawsuit charged they acted in concert with these scammers in a RICO, racketeering. And this is pretty serious stuff. This is nothing to take lightly. And the size and basically, this first group, Chargebacks911, disputed 77,000 chargebacks. Apex Capital number 2, they disputed 47,000 chargebacks. And F9 Advertising, owned by Gopal Krishna Pai, who's now in prison, they disputed 41,000 chargebacks. So total disputes that Chargebacks911 did on behalf of scammers were 165,000. So this is not a trivial. This was a big deal, because the dollar amount went about $230 million, hence the lawsuit. And you can see here in one case, one of the scammer clients stipulated and paid a major fine. This is an example of one of Chargebacks911 and other scammy clients, Media Group. You can see that it would use all these shell companies. So, for example, in the upper left-hand column, Alpha Group LLC, if they were getting too many chargebacks, you would just do mode switching to one of the UK-based companies, say Digital X Solutions. So you could hopscotch back and forth, and that's part of your load balancing. So if Old Equity LLC was getting too high, you would do microtransactions to get it down. But meantime, you would shift the actual credit cards to go into Nutra Global Ltd. So you can see it's just a matter of moving from account to account, load balancing. And when one account, like Shadow Peak LLC, got too hot, you would shift the credit card payments to Sky Blue Media. And then Chargebacks911 would do microtransactions. So you can see how complex this fraud was. And it's really amazing to get your mind around what they were doing, what they were engaged in. So those are, I just briefly, that's an overview. And I was watching a video where Gary Cardone, where am I at? I was watching a video in which I have to stop sharing that. Okay. Again, we're having problems. Okay, so that's how complex the fraud was. And oh, hi, Sarasota Jerry, Patrick Skinner, and Mark Hardman. So you can see the complex fraud. It's easy to understand. You basically have selling a scammy product and you're offsetting, you're doing microtransactions to do load balancing. And that's it in a nutshell. Gary Cardone did an interview at a cryptocurrency. He left Chargebacks911 a couple of years ago, and Monica became CEO. But Gary did a video at a crypto coin, because he's gotten big into crypto, where he said he complained to the interviewer that he spent $7 million in legal fees fighting this case. And in the end, the government slapped him, gave him a hand slap, and told him he was a bad boy. And I think Gary, I can understand him being angry that the government came after him, but they didn't just slap his hand. It's not as simple as that, Gary. So we're going to, take dispute with that. We're going to share a screen. So what happened in the Federal Trade Commission case, Gary and Monica, as the co-founders and owners of Global E-Trading, you can see up here that they signed a stipulated order for permanent injunction, monetary relief, statutory relief, and final judgment. So this was with the Federal Trade Commission, and Office of the Attorney General of the State of Florida Department of Legal Affairs. So this was very serious. Gary Cardone might call it them saying he was a bad boy. No, Gary, this was a stipulated order. This is the evidence that you crossed the line. And this is one of those things where they had to agree with the government. They didn't. The complaint alleges the defendants participated in unfair acts or practices in violation of Section 5, and it alleges they submitted misleading documentation in connection with disputing consumer chargeback requests on behalf of their clients, ignored red flags indicating that the documentation was misleading, and in effect causing to be affected microtransactions that artificially lowered a merchant's overall chargeback rate by inflating the total number of transactions that ran through the merchant's accounts. The defendants neither admitted or denied. However, they agreed under this stipulated order not to do business with certain types of clients, and they agreed not to engage in certain types of behaviors. And this is a matter of public record. Negative feature options. This is we don't have to go through it, but you can see that Gary's insistence during that crypto interview that he got a hand slap. No, Gary, it was far more serious than that. So they had to pay a $100,000 penalty, $50,000 here for fees, the Attorney General for payments of its fees. So they paid $150,000, but they also had to. There's some other provisions in it. So it was a pretty serious thing, but that was it. And so they have to submit to compliance reporting. And anyway, there was a lot of fallout from this. And so they have to identify things, and they got in trouble. This was a serious thing that you have to go, and I'll stop sharing that, but you get the idea. So they basically had to sign a stipulated order, but that still left the civil case open. Any word on Grant's crypto and his real estate fraud? Hey, Mona, good to see you here, sunshine. We're going to touch. Okay, so anyway, let's take a moment for Grant Cardone because he deserves attention. Grant Cardone just had a major legal loss, and I'm going to show you that. And his crypto and real estate fraud, you would have to define what you mean by fraud. He maybe let me give you a hand here because it's a good question, Denise. Grant Cardone just lost a major court case. I should say he had a major reversal in a court case. And I have this ready because I anticipated the question. Yes, what happened, Grant Cardone, let me get this over here so I can see what you're seeing. I'm going to go full screen on this. I posted this at the world famous Scientology Money Project. To answer your question, Denise, there's a case, and I have it posted here. This is Grant giving us the OT8 salute. Grant Cardone loses at appeals court. Pino versus Cardone class action lawsuit to go forward. Basically, Grant Cardone was online soliciting for people to purchase private securities because Cardone Capital sells private equity or unregistered securities, as you call them. And he was making all kinds of promises like a 15% return if you invested with him, which cannot be guaranteed. He didn't disclose risks, but this is an interesting thing that could go to the Supreme Court. Grant said that his online sales, inducement to purchase securities was not actually a solicitation to buy or sell securities. The lower court agreed with Cardone in Pino versus Cardone. However, the Court of Appeals reversed, and the circuit judge, this is interesting, Circuit Judge McKeown said, quote, in an uncertain economic climate, and this was in low interest days, right? In an uncertain economic climate, the offer of a 15% return on investment may be just too enticing to pass up. And indeed it was. Grant Cardone and the real estate syndicator he founded, Cardone Capital, projected just such an investment return online to unsophisticated investors. Cardone shared his offerings on social media, boasting on Instagram that investors could double their money and telling viewers on YouTube, quote, you're going to walk away with a 15% annualized return. If I'm in that deal for 10 years, you're going to earn 150%. You can tell the SEC that's what I said it would be. Some people call me Nostradamus because I'm predicting the future. Dude, this is what's going to happen, unquote. Yeah, bro. So the appeals court said that constitutes online selling, and we're going to send this case back to trial. So they reversed the lower court. Cardone is not going to do, my prediction, Cardone is going to get slaughtered at court. My prediction is he's going to try to go to the Supreme Court to try to get the appeals court overturned. The question is, can people like Grant Cardone push their private equity, their Regulation A or Regulation D online, and not call it a solicitation to buy, because you're barred from soliciting on a private equity or advertising. And I think Cardone is going to lose this one big time, and it's going to have fallout for the entire industry, because when you say that you're going to get 15% return online, you're not offering all the disclosures. You're supposed to say, now this in a prospectus is how you do it. And you say you can lose all or part of your money. Cardone never did those disclosures. He said it was stupid to buy a house, and that you should put all your money in with him. This is one thing that really I was quite mad at. Grant was advising young people not to do something stupid like buy a house and get equity, God forbid, when you could throw it into his multifamily apartments. And but he locks up your money for 10 years. That's why it's called an illiquid investment. Illiquid investment. So Grant got in trouble for this. So that's the latest update, is that he's headed back to court, and it's not going to be good. It's not going to be good by any means, because anytime you make that kind of offer, and then another thing Cardone didn't disclose that we've been over is that when he told his listeners that he personally takes on the debt. Well, now it's known that he would buy the property for, say, $100 million, but he would, put 20% down of his own money, $20 million. He would buy it as an individual. Then he would sell it to Cardone Capital for a profit, say $115 million, pocket the profit, and then he would take a 1% acquisition fee on the Cardone Capital side. So there was self-dealing or front-running as investors. That's going to come out also. And he was selling to unaccredited investors in his Regulation A offerings and not accredited investors. To be an accredited investor, you have to have net worth in excess of $1 million, not including your home. If you're an individual, you have to have $200,000 in income for each of the last 2 years, $300,000 if you're married. So this article here goes in to explain it. And then I have the lawsuit posted. The lawsuit's there where it says network error, but you'll get it. So the update is that Grant Cardone has to go back to court. in the Pinot case, and Louis Pinot has passed away, so his estate's handling it. Any word on the "Are You a Billionaire" lawsuit? If that's John Legere, John Legere apologized, and the lawsuit was dropped, and maybe both of them didn't want to go into court. So John Legere backed down to Grant Cardone, and it's interesting how what might have happened to cause John Legere to go down, because he was ready to go to court and then he wasn't, and it raises some questions about the benefits of being an OT8 and having a private agency at your disposal. You can read between the lines. Well, you can advertise online. You can advertise, but you can't promise 15% returns to unsophisticated investors. So this is the kind of stuff that David Gentile, he got sentenced to 10 years in prison, and GPB Capital, he has to serve 7 and have 3 years of supervised release. So and they got Gentile on, they had him dead to rights. So there's certain things you can't do that you'll go to jail for. I don't think that Grant's case will go from civil to criminal. So, but he does have a civil case. So I like I said, my prediction is he appeals it to the Supreme Court. They may choose to explore it, because it is an interesting question. What constitutes an online solicitation? So anytime you have a disruptive technology like the internet, where you can sell securities, unregistered securities, private equity, and all kinds of scams, the Supreme Court may need to file it. Alternatively, they may say no. They may agree with the appeals court and just remand it back to the lower court for trial, in which case all of the evidence against Grant will be bad, and I think he will lose the lawsuit in that case and pay a lot of money. So anyway, that's the update on there. For Chargebacks911, the case is going to go forward, and I wanted to share some interesting stuff in the legal filings that I had been looking at. I just have to get them up online here. So that's the update. Did that answer your question? Let me find. I have to find. There's so many legal filings. One thing I think that happened. My argument is that Gary Cardone and Monica Eaton were prepared to go to trial. They got right up to the edge of Chargebacks911 civil case with Janet Seiler and Charlene Bevankoff and others. They went up to they got up to document 323. So there are 323 filings in this case, and they were prepared to go to court. I think they should have cut their losses a lot sooner and settled. Hey, Poe, good to see you here. Howdy to you, Chief Poe. Good to see you. So sometimes discretion is the better part of valor. My argument here, and based on what I'm going to show you, is that Monica and Gary Cardone should have settled sooner, because what I'm going to show you is in the public domain. It's a court record that I got off Pacer, and it kind of gives you some insights. This is stuff I wouldn't have shared. I would have settled sooner. And we're gonna go through some exhibits that just kind of show you the complexity of how far Monica Eaton and Gary Cardone got before they decided that maybe we should get the fuck out of this case. That's my opinion, okay? So let me go back. Let me cue this up. What, Brendana? Who's a fraud? Oh, yeah, David Miscavige. No, we're not talking about him. I was talking to someone, and they asked me, I said, I think, just divert for a minute. The IES is the real power center. The IES is the real power center of Scientology. That's the multi-billion-dollar war chest. I think the Church of Scientology and all the OT auditing and clear, I think that's the sideshow. That's sort of the distraction. I think David Miscavige, and I could be wrong, No one's ever challenged me on it. I think David Miscavige is worth $300 to $400 million or more. And he got that because he's the chief FSM. He's the chief fundraiser for the IES, and he gets 10% of the cut. And the IES is a legally separate corporation from RTC, completely legally separate. So somebody asked me to say that in public, express my opinion. David Miscavige, I think he's worth $300 to $400 million or more, and that came from his function as an IES fundraiser. And the church has never batted back at me. They've ignored me. I could be wrong, but I'm just saying, pulling the go is complaining like an old man. Worn out, my friend. Long day in unusual Michigan heat. Just jumping in to say hey and show some support. Thank you, Poe. But that's one of the things. It is hot back east. Here in LA, it's about 70 degrees right now. And yeah, it's hot up there. I like the heat, being from SoCal. I lived in the desert for 10 years in the Mojave. I like it. Cold, though, I don't like. So anyway, someone had asked me about David Miscavige, and we're going to do another show about how the IES is the main show. Church of Scientology is just a distraction. That's what I think is really going on. And I also offered the opinion that the real center of the Scientology world is Milan, Org, and the Swiss southernmost canton of Ticino. That's where the nexus is in Europe, and that's what I think you should keep your eye on. South America also has a lot going on. Peru, Colombia, and some other places. South America is where I'm keeping my eye on. Those are the real things I'm doing. Okay, so I'm going to share a court document, and it's going to be document 323. Now, this case has been settled, but before they settled, I'm going to show you what happened before they settled, because this is so damn interesting for legal types. And this is going to be, I need this one. I'm going to share this. Okay, before Gary and Monica settled, this is so utterly fascinating for legal types. And this was a joint final pretrial statement. And it was filed on June 6th, 2025, page 1 of 38. This is the one that's going to be posted on the Scientology Money Project. And people like Mona, other legal types, will just, this is utterly fascinating. Okay, so they have a witness list, they have an exhibit list, they have all this stuff they filed. They're going to go to court and fight it. Gary and Monica are going to fight it out, but it gets settled. Why? So they go through the court propounds the usual things: jurisdiction, concise statement of the action. Okay. Plaintiffs, that's Janet and Charlene, and other similarly situated victims of the keto scam that was aided and abetted allegedly by Chargebacks911, for which they signed a stipulated order with the Federal Trade Commission. That would have come in at court. Plaintiffs assert a claim against Chargebacks911 for allegedly participating in the keto enterprise in violation of RICO. And then the other people are the Fulfillment Lab, Richard Nelson, David Flynn, Ricky Joe James. I'd like to have a name like that. Hey, Ricky Joe James, what you doing in town? You working on your keto fraud? Okay, Beyond Global Inc., Bright Tree Holdings Corporation. Keep that in mind. Bright Tree Holdings Corporation, Mike Campbell, some other people. According to the complaint, the purpose of the keto enterprise was to build a durable. According to the complaint, the purpose of the keto enterprise was to build a durable scam. Because scam should be durable, that could victimize consumers by overcharging them for diet pills while avoiding regulatory scrutiny as cheap as possible. Now, to me, I'm going to read this last part because this sounds exactly like Scientology. I substituted a word just for fun. The purpose of the Church of Scientology, you're reading down on 3 lines up. If you just substitute the Keto Enterprise, the purpose of the Keto Enterprise, but we're going to say the purpose of the Church of Scientology is to build a durable scam that can victimize consumers by overcharging them for courses, books, services, while avoiding regulatory scrutiny as cheaply as possible. That's a great definition of the Church of Scientology, a durable scam to victimize consumers by overcharging them while avoiding regulatory scrutiny as cheaply as possible. Well, the problem you see is these keto scammers did not become a religion. They could have started the Church of the Keto Sacrament and become a religion. Of course, Chargebacks911 denied the claim. So they're trying to, that was the allegation in the case, that they're trying to create a durable fraud. Chargebacks911 would do thousands of load balancing microtransactions. So if you got, 200,000 chargebacks, Chargebacks911 would go ahead and do 199,000 microtransactions among 200 or 300 companies to load balance and keep the credit card accounts intact. That was, in that course, Chargebacks911 denies this claim. And that's one of those cases where a lawyer, this is one of those cases where a lawyer like E. Stuart Mills would say, Your Honor, my clients might be many things unholy, but they're not scammers. It's like saying, Your Honor, my client may be many things that are bad, but he's not a criminal. Anyway, this is ridiculous. So this is what you do during pretrials. That was, and then the plaintiffs made a statement. Now this gets interesting because they talk about RICO, the use of shell companies, and they basically describe what I just described to you. I'm not going to read it, but basically, there's some serious allegations made about fraud, money laundering. Those are the predicate crimes you need for RICO. RICO is not a charge in and of itself. A bit of explaining to do, Poe, you could, or Poe, in fact, grab me if you want to jump in. I want to clarify because some people don't quite understand it. RICO is not a charge in and of itself. You can't file a RICO lawsuit. The government can't do a RICO criminal action. RICO requires what's called predicate acts, like money laundering, wire fraud, things like that. There has to be predicate acts by 2 or more people because you have to have a conspiracy to engage in racketeering. So the predicate acts that they're alleging include money laundering, fraud, this load balancing schemes, and they say that Chargebacks911 was aiding and abetting, and that's why originally this is a civil RICO lawsuit that Monica and Gary were involved with. So a RICO action, because there's been Tom DeVox has been talking about RICO, and I think he could sharpen it up in a lot of ways. Sharpen up by explaining what RICO really is, what the predicate acts would be. I think he could sharpen up his blog in that way, and also by maybe understanding things like religions in America are not required to disclose the names of their boards of directors. Just a friendly word. You don't have to disclose the names of directors or anything. And I like what Tom is doing, but I would sharpen it up a little bit by at least giving readers definitions like what RICO is and what predicate acts are that constitute RICO. And because that's what we're doing. So, so anyway, this is a RICO case of, I think they added human trafficking. Who's they added human trafficking? Are you talking about what Tom DeVocht is doing? Mona, just to clarify, we're staying on. So you're talking about Tom DeVocht. Okay. If they did, well, all I'm saying is this friendly word, Tom could add definitional things so his audience could follow. Sometimes that's needed to really understand what RICO is. Just do a post on RICO, what constitutes it. That's all. That's all I was saying. But I'm reading Tom's blog and enjoying it. Now, Mona. Oh, not the feds added it to the predicated charges. In what case? Did I lose something? Mona, we may have to talk. 'Cause I'm not understanding what we're talking about, and so because we're trying to chat over line. Okay, so the the defendant's statement. So you can see what the plaintiff said. There was all kinds of salacious behavior that it constituted racketeering. Now the plaintiffs. I'm going to read. I'm sorry, the defendants. I'm going to read the defendants in the interest of fairness to Gary and Monica. I want to read their statement. Plaintiffs. This is what Monica and Gary wrote. Plaintiffs have brought a claim under RICO for direct violation of the statute and aiding and abetting. Plaintiffs' claim against CB911 for allegedly violating Section 1962 rests on two theories. One, that Chargebacks911 itself committed money laundering and wire fraud and aided and abetted Brightree's wire and mail fraud scheme to defraud customers. Count one alleges that Global E-Trading, that's Chargebacks911, committed predicate acts of wire fraud and money laundering and aided and abetted the acts of mail and wire fraud committed by other members of the Q enterprise. I just want to say these are serious felonies which would cause this to go criminal. Because once you talk about you're being accused of the predicate acts of wire fraud and money laundering, those are both felonies that get you 20 years in prison for each count. Wire fraud, money laundering, I think it's a 240-month sentence. And aided and abetted acts of mail and wire fraud. So that's conspiracy. That's another charge. So we're getting into very serious stuff. And Chargebacks911, Gary and Monica's lawyers wrote, the evidence at trial will show that plaintiffs have failed to establish any of the 6 required elements of their substantive RICO claims. And they enumerate those. They continue. The evidence at trial will show that plaintiffs have failed to establish the existence of the Quito enterprise as an association in fact enterprise. That's a term of law. You could look up association in fact enterprise. Instead, the evidence will demonstrate that Chargebacks911 had a lawful, inconsistent commercial relationship with Brightree, by which Chargebacks911 periodically provided its regular commercial services. So they're saying they didn't know about it. There's another place where in it here. Further, the evidence will show that the plaintiffs have failed to prove that Chargebacks911 committed at least 2 predicate acts that were related to one another. Specifically, the evidence will show Chargebacks911 did not commit money laundering because it did not know the money it used to process refunds was obtained through Brightree's wire fraud, or that it refunded money with the intent to promote the carrying on of Brightree's fraud. This is very interesting here. Chargebacks911 saying it didn't commit money laundering because it did not know the money it used to process refund was obtained through Brightree's wire fraud. So it's throwing Brighttree under the bus, saying we didn't know that Brighttree was engaged in wire fraud. Therefore, we couldn't have committed money laundering. So they would have had to prove that that Chargebacks911, its representatives, agents, or Gary and Monica knew that Brightree was engaged in money laundering, and to pay the refunds, Chargebacks911 was knowingly taking money that was illegally obtained and thereby engaging in money laundering. Money laundering is placement, layer, and integration. This is an important point. To have money laundering, you have to have layering, placement, integration. So in this case, if Brightree had stolen money, they would put it into an account for Chargebacks911. They would layer it into a Chargebacks911 refund account to consumers. That's how you place it. And then they would integrate it so that Chargebacks911 would refund it to consumers. And thereby they would launder some of their money, give part of it back, and then the rest of the money they would keep, because the stolen money they would keep, and they would layer some of it back as refunds so it looked like legitimate money. That's not the best explanation, but the point is, what surprised me is that Chargebacks911 said specifically the evidence will show that Chargebacks911 did not commit money laundering because it did not know the money it used to process refunds was obtained through Brightree's wire fraud. So it's not denying that Brightree committed wire fraud, as I read it, but it's saying it didn't refund money with the intent to promote the carrying on of Brightree's fraud. So this is really tangled. This is why I think they didn't want to go into court, because if in front of a jury trying to explain how we refunded money that was a product of money laundering or fraud, we didn't know about it. I don't know how that would have played in front of a jury. And I think that's part of why. And this other fellow, Ben Schrancher, he's a guy, this guy, Ben, right here, Ben Schrancher, he's a guy I think they didn't want in court. All the attention's focused on Ben Schrancher of Chargebacks911. And he's really something. Here, Mark's got a good comment. Civil RICO requires one of the following elements: mail fraud and wire fraud, extortion, bribery, money laundering, or embezzlement. Thank you, Mark. I'm glad you added that to give me specificity. So civil RICO, so they were alleging mail fraud, wire fraud, money laundering. But you know what, Mark? Your definition of RICO, mail fraud and wire fraud, extortion, bribery, money laundering, or embezzlement, that sounds to me, in my opinion, just like another Monday in the Church of Scientology, right? Or just another Thursday before 2:00 in the Church of Scientology. Yeah, it's sort of like drug trafficking, human trafficking, government corruption, bribery, extortion, embezzlement, murder, kidnapping, fraud, money laundering. Yep. Sounds like just another day in Crime Incorporated. This is interesting. We're going to have Mark, if you're available, and maybe Mona, we could do a podcast on this. So anyway, they acknowledged that they were unaware that one of their clients was engaged in money laundering. This is why I think they settled before court. So they're arguing that we didn't do anything that constituted RICO. I think it could have been proven based on what I read, my opinion. I think it could have been proven that they did at trial, and that's why they chose to settle. Now, this thing goes on, and it's quite interesting to read. These are everyone was going to, Gary, Cardone, and Monica were going to have to testify. But anyway, rather than scrolling through this, I want to go to page 38, because this is something really interesting. If you want to get down into the dirty nitty gritty of it. Where is it at? 38. Okay, here it is. This you want to listen to if you want the dirt. Okay. C, prior approval for certain topics. Now we know where Monica and Gary, their psychic points of tension. The parties agree, point number one, the parties agree that before raising the following topics via witness testimony or documentary evidence, they will approach the bench to obtain permission from the court first. One, size of defendants, law firms, or the numbers of attorneys representing the parties. That's really interesting. Two is the pith of the matter. Miss Eaton's and Mr. Cardone's divorce proceedings and statements made therein by them, their counsel, or the judge. It looks like Gary Cardone and Monica Eaton didn't want their divorce brought into the trial. Their divorce proceedings and statements made therein by them, their counsel, or the judge. Wait a minute. Now, suddenly, I want to know all about their divorce proceeding and statements made therein by them. Were they of the nature? I mean, I don't know. This gives rise to speculation. Why would you have to do sidebar with the judge before you could talk about their divorce proceedings and what they said? Well, obviously, it's germane to the case at hand. It's obviously they don't want it discussed. They want to keep it out, or they want it limited. And it's almost like they're trying to set it up for a mistrial. So whatever incendiary things appear to have been said during their divorce proceedings may have gone directly to the case. Maybe they argued over the conduct of what they were doing during their divorce proceedings. This is point number two, is really something. Don't talk about our divorce. You have to get the judge's permission. Like I said, I think this was trying to set up. I think Gary and Monica's lawyers were trying to set up for a possible mistrial during sentence. Now, also number three, you had to get a sidebar with the judge before you could talk about enforcement actions, investigations, or lawsuits pertaining to entities that are not defendants in the instant action, this case, and are not alleged to have participated in the alleged enterprises. Now, this is important because this case, United States versus CB Surety LLC, is almost a cookie cutter case of Chargebacks911 RICO. Almost cookie cutter. And they don't want you to bring up anything, any enforcement actions, investigations, or lawsuits, because this case is almost a carbon copy. I went and read through this. So when you look at a case, what one side wants left out is as important as what they want let in. What they don't want into the case is I'll repeat that, what they don't want in the case is as important as they want to admit into the case. So this got really fascinating, you know. So something went on in the divorce proceedings that may have influenced the jury to reach a decision that's not in favor of the defendants. And also the size of the defendant's law firm, it may have shown that the defendants were spending a lot of money to fight this, and the plaintiffs weren't. That could influence the jury. We have Gary's own statement to the, and I do have the interview downloaded. I'm not going to play it here, where Gary said he spent $7 million fighting the Federal Trade Commission and got his hands slapped and told he was a bad boy, and it's more serious than that. So that's what's going on. But I'll post the whole 38-page document. And then when I went on to Pacer, they had settled, like on the courtroom stairs. Maybe it seemed like they settled on the day of trial during like they settled right before trial. And it's sealed, and we don't know what they settled. I presume, based on what we just read, that Chargebacks911 settled on terms favorable to the plaintiffs. That's all I can assume. And the things they want to kept out, especially the divorce proceedings, fascinates me. and that other fraud case. I want to see what the connections are. So that's what is up to date. And somebody was asking me about yeah, so that's why I think they wanted to avoid a high risk public trial where all this would have come out, especially Ben Scrancher being put on the stand. I think he would have sunk the Chargebacks911 case when he was cross-examined. He may have possibly have had to take the Fifth Amendment. That's my opinion. I could be wrong. I think Ben Scrancher was one of the key people in this. So that case got settled, and Chargebacks911, it's not put out there, obviously, because they're not going to talk about it. So that's what's going on in keeping up with the world of Scientology. Let me see if I have anything else. Oh yeah, I did want to show you something. I want to do a story on, I think I mentioned in another podcast. What about the civil lawsuit with Danny Masterson? I don't have the latest update, Denise. I would check Tony Ortega's blog. He really keeps up on that. I know I get that Danny Masterson has asked for several delays and been granted the delays. I get those notices from the California Court of Appeals. He's asked for some delays in filing. So I couldn't give you an update. Maybe I'll do something on that. There's not a lot of information available. You can get the court documents, and that's a good question. And like I said, Tony Ortega is, keeps up on that case. If they wanted to email me the documents, I would post them routinely, but I don't get copies of the documents, or I would be glad to post them on my blog and update it. So if Cedric, if you want to, arrange for me to post it and update, I'd be glad to work with you, help in any way I can, because the public has a right to know. Something I covered, and this was a really strange thing. Grant Cardone, since we're keeping up with the Cardones, he has a fund where he proposed, he has a Space Coast Bitcoin fund. And this is kind of some kind of screwball deal where when you invest in the Space Coast, this is an apartment complex. He calls it multifamily. You're buying some Bitcoin, or they're going to use part of the proceeds to buy Bitcoin. So you're investing in multifamily apartments, locking your money up for 10 years in a liquid investment in arguably an overbuilt area where insurance rates are rising in Florida, but you're going to get some Bitcoin. So Cardone writes, you can see there, we are pleased to present an exceptional opportunity to invest in the acquisition of 10X Space Coast Town Center, a 300 luxury apartment community situated within Central Florida's booming high-tech corridor of Melbourne. And if you invested, they're going to use part of the proceeds, I read the prospectus, to buy Bitcoin. So my question to you, Grant Cardone, why would I bother? If you're so big on Bitcoin, I would invest all my money in Bitcoin and not in your apartments. See, this is where Grant Cardone is speaking out of both sides of his mouth, and he seems uncertain because he was all in. The only way to go, the only possible investment in the world, he was saying for years, was multifamily. That's the gospel Grant Cardone preaches, is multifamily. That's the hill he will die on, multifamily. You shouldn't buy a house. You shouldn't invest in stock market. Grant Cardone is on record saying you shouldn't invest in your own house. That's stupid. You shouldn't buy a duplex or a fourplex. You need to buy above 16 units. And you need to invest with me because I can get you in on deals that you've been locked out of, that only the big guys have by investing with me. Well, a lot of syndicators do that, Grant. You didn't invent that. See, this is where Grant seems to be like influenced by his brother Gary, who's like really into crypto. Gary Cardone, uh, to me, when Gary Cardone speaks, he makes much more sense and coherence as a business person. I like listening to Gary, actually. He makes a lot of sense on some of the things he says. He is a business person. A lot of people don't know this, but Gary Cardone made a fortune in energy in the 80s and 90s over in Europe. And he's the seed money behind Cardone Capital. I've always said that I think Gary Cardone is the brains behind Grant Cardone. And Gary makes a lot of sense sometimes when he talks business. He knows what he's talking about. Grant, not so much. The story went around that when Gary came back from Europe with a lot of money and he was at Flag, Grant Cardone was there, and the two looked so much alike at the time that Gary didn't like being mistaken for Grant and grumbled a little, and they shipped Grant out to LA because Gary didn't want his twin brother at Flag, and Grant went out to about that place in La Jolla, I believe, made a fortune, met his future wife in a trailer where Mitch Brisker was. So yeah, Grant, this shows like you can't invest in things like this. Like you're supposed to take your distribution and put it into Bitcoin, or they're going to invest some part of this. So what I did is I got the prospectus, and it was hard to get. Let me see. No, that's not what I want. No, we're gonna have to go somewhere else. Anyway, I dug down into this to try to find out what it was, and no, this is The Real Deal. By the way, is a great paper if you want to follow Grant Cardone. Oh, this is an interesting thing where rent growth has slowed. I had something from the prospectus. That was the hard. Oh, yeah, this is now when you present graphics, they should be clear and easy to understand. So when Grant Cardone Capital put up this chart is hard and difficult to understand. But basically, the gold line is Bitcoin. And it's this is showing a 6-year return. So if we start out in year zero, and we have 87.5 million, the blue line is, I'm looking at it right, the blue line is real estate. And projecting it out, yeah, you can see on top, where you see on the very top little box, the blue line is traditional real estate returns, years 1 to 5. And then the gold one is projected, I guess it's a real estate Bitcoin fusion. This is a little bit confusing, but basically it's showing that if you start out with an investment of 87.5 million in multifamily, at year 6, you'll go have 173 million. Okay, so you about double it. But Bitcoin, you come up with $773 million. So the logical strategy here, according to Grant Cardone, who here apparently gives us enough rope to hang himself, the logic here would be to ditch any investment in Grant Cardone's real estate and just go for Bitcoin. If Bitcoin's going to go from 87 million to 773 in that time period, then just get rid of the real estate component and put it all into Bitcoin. That's what Gary Cardone's saying. And so Grant, this chart actually is an argument to not invest in your real estate, which kind of shows how, in my opinion, how stupid you are. You don't get it. You don't say this is not a fusion investment. This is an argument to invest in Bitcoin and not invest in apartments, which grow at a much slower rate of growth. I mean, Grant, this is a stupid thing to do. You're not making any sense, son. And I would put all my money into Bitcoin if this were the case. If I really believe these projections, I wouldn't want anything to do with apartments. In fact, what Gary Cardone said that made a lot of sense. He's talking about crypto, and I'm not agreeing. I'm just saying that Gary Cardone makes a more coherent argument rather than fusing Bitcoin and real estate or any other business. Gary Cardone said in this interview, the one where he said he got his hand slapped by the Federal Trade Commission, he said that Bitcoin doesn't require any overhead or maintenance. So he said, Gary Cardone said, if you own a Popeye's chicken, you have to pay for the rent for the building, you have payroll, electrical problems, things go wrong with the facility. He said someone could spit in the batter, one of your employees could spit in the batter, thereby giving a vivid example. But that could happen. But Gary makes the point that when you're running a physical business like a Popeye's chicken, you're going to have all these ongoing expenses and headaches and hassles with employees. Someone calls in sick, they can't make their shift. You might have to go down there and take their shift for them, or you got to have people working. You got turnover and training. Where Bitcoin is a much better investment because there's no overhead. Grant Cardone has constantly having to replace toilets and garbage disposals and pipes that are clogged. Now, he has a property management company that he owns that he pays himself to do that. But, all that maintenance. So Bitcoin, from that perspective, yeah, Gary makes sense. It doesn't have any overhead. Now, it's subject to some other risks, especially here in the US. If you own it, the government's going to watch you like a hawk. So that's it. So Monica and Gary, I think, wisely avoided getting slaughtered in court, especially when the testimony started, because some of the statements they made, we didn't know about the money laundering, but you participated in it. And if the plaintiffs could have proven that they did know about it, like if they'd got an employee to flip. So I think they were smart to settle it. And I'm glad for the plaintiffs that they got some justice. But I think Monica and Gary let it go on too long. As far as Grant Cardone's fusion of real estate and Bitcoin, makes no sense to me. So that's what I have today. Any questions before we go? Let me see if I have anything. I just want to check because I've been doing. Oh, let me. So anyway, Grant Cardone. I'm sorry. There's not an actual air raid. I had that as a sound effect. Hold on a minute. Just stand by. It's not an actual air raid. I just have to turn this off. Okay, there you go. I always like that World War II air raid siren. When I was in grade school, from the time I was in kindergarten to 8th grade, maybe till I was 14, 15, the last Friday of every month in America, this is from like 63 to 72, the last Friday of every month in America, the air raid sirens would go on at 10 a.m. in the morning to be tested. And we would have to do duck and cover in school. So I grew up in the Cold War. And to me, that's a really haunting sound. And so I used it as a sound effect. Anyway, a lot of boomers out there who know what I'm talking about. Put a one in the chat if you did duck and cover drills in school. Just curious how many boomers had to go through that, because it was kind of scary. You're living with edge of nuclear annihilation. Yeah, standing by the avenue. Oh, I wanted to just bring your attention to something. Since Tom DeVocht is working to expose Scientology, I wanted to recommend this work to Tom and his readers. The late Denise Brennan, many of you remember her. She's a transgender woman. She started out as Larry Brennan. This is something I recommend that you read. And for newer Scientology watchers, this is is really interesting to have. And I just want to show it to you. It's been out for a while, but the late Denise Brennan produced it. Denise, before transitioning, was Larry Brennan, a Scientology executive. And I remember Denise well. We used to talk a lot. This was a shoot I did years ago. This is my real hope that we see this one day. Miscavige doing the perp walk in cuffs. Don't think it can't happen, Dave. Bigger people than you have been put in cuffs. If they can get P. Diddy, they can get you, Dave. Keep that in mind, Mr. Global Ecclesiastical Religious Leader. Yeah, anyway, Larry Brennan, Denise Brennan, was a top-ranking executive in that period when L. Ron Hubbard was in hiding, and there was a mission corporate category sort out, and Hubbard wanted to make it safe for him to come back into public. That was a cleanup. So they replaced the Guardian's office with OSA. And if you ever want to look at the OSA hat pack, it's on my blog. Just you Google the Frank Oliver hat pack. Frank was leaked that, and I appreciate you doing that, Frank. But Larry was around when they created the Church of Scientology, Church of Spiritual Technology, RTC, CSI structure. An interesting thing Larry told me, that they hired Omar Garrison, who'd written a favorable book on Scientology, and they hired him to write a biography of L. Ron Hubbard, and Jerry Armstrong was appointed an assistant to give Omar Garrison all kinds of Ron's archival materials, because Hubbard never threw away anything. When you go to the Lifetime Museum in Hollywood when it was open, you could see stuff from his boyhood. He never threw away anything. So Jerry, that's where Jerry got the affirmations. And we have Jerry Armstrong to thank for that. Thank you, Jerry. And anyway, Omar Garrison actually wrote a truthful biography of Hubbard and found out he lied about almost everything in his entire life. So I remember Larry Brennan, Denise, telling me that he went to a meeting with the attorneys in Woodland Hills where they paid Omar a huge sum of money to basically do a catch and kill on the real LRH biography that Omar Garrison had written. And Garrison was later on 60 Minutes and told Mike Wallace that L. Ron Hubbard's stories were all a lie, and you can find that online. So we have Jerry Armstrong to thank for introducing L. Ron Hubbard's affirmations, his occult writings. We're in Jerry's debt for that. And anyway, Denise started getting sick, and it was clear that she had a condition that was terminal. And I talked to her. She's a dear friend of Karen and I. So anyway, the manuscript got purchased. According to Denise, that manuscript is locked in David Miscavige's personal safe and will never see the light of day. And that's where Danny Sherman came along to do little magazines about Ron the adventurer, Ron the musician, Ron the whatever. But Anonymous, thoughtfully, when Denise was in her last days, Anonymous did a lot of work to help Larry, who had made tons of posts about Scientology on Xenu.net and other forums that are never around. They put together those statements. And I posted this PDF just the other day to help Tom DeVocht and others. The Miscavige legal statements, a study in perjury, lies, and misdirection, because Denise Brennan was there when it went down, and he compiled it. And then Jefferson Hawkins, former exec who wrote Counterfeit Dreams, I link here, he created this chart based on Denise Brennan's work, Scientology's management organization, both in theory and how it actually works. And this is in the PDF. I cut it in 2 parts and posted it. So this is a very valuable document for new people, new to Scientology research, or existing people, who want to read how it really works and how this is a very high level, sophisticated look at how the church works, and I recommend it. So it's on my blog, but the actual Denise Brennan's book, I believe it came out it came out before Larry had transitioned to Denise, and he was very much alive. This book I want to bring to public attention. It's in PDF form on my blog, and I'll put it on a Scribed account where you can download it. The plugin I have for my WordPress browser doesn't allow downloading, but it's all there. And Larry, there's a picture of Larry before he transitioned. I think he was speaking in Germany here. And this is stuff he did at the old Why We Protest, the old ESMB. And this is just pure gold. And those forums are all gone. So thank you to Anonymous. And this has declarations of David Miscavige and Homer Schomer, Jesse Prince, just some stuff you can't find. And if you're new to this, like Mona, you would find this fascinating. So there's a preface, but this is 83 pages of things that would help people with their YouTube channels. It would help people with their blogs. It would help understand the architecture of what really went on. And because this is all documented, and Denise Brennan had a brilliant mind. So you have all the documents in there, all the sources. Some of the links are broken, even on the Wayback Machine, but at least we have them here in writing. And here's, for example, one of Miscavige's lies. He said, "I was not involved in that restructuring, but I'm aware of the events that led up to it." No, he was directly involved in the restructuring, and he was in power at ASI, as Chuck Beatty talks about. So I want to recommend this to you. In closing, is Denise Brennan's excellent book, and also this chart for those of new Scientology watchers or researchers who are not really familiar with the sophisticated architecture of what goes on. And you can also get input like the Church of Scientology. That's there as like a placeholder, but like, for example, the exec strata of Church of Scientology International, the executive director international, David Miscavige busted them all off post. This was written when Mike Rinder was still CO OSA. So you'll see his name as commanding officer of OSA and a member of Watchdog Committee. So this was still written before Mike Rinder left the church. So this is an important work. And some of it's dated, and in terms of Miscavige's perjury and lies, that's not dated. It shows when he said what and why he lied. And the IRS final draft agreement allows the question of tax exemption to be open in the finding of fraud, malfeasance, or misrepresentation of fact. So this is something that we could conceivably get to the IRS to reopen because of fraud, malfeasance, or misrepresentation of fact. And Larry Denise Brennan gives us so much evidence in this book. I recommend that you download it, look at it. So anyway, thank you for listening. That's all the news I have. And we'll go out with, I always like to go out with the ships, because according to Captain Bill Robertson, there's an impending Marcab invasion. And I figured these look like Marcab ships, if anything does. So just be aware of the Marcab ships, and Captain Bill has your back. And, I'm sure he's still out there. And it's interesting that Scientology used to be, and Hubbard used to be so much into Marcab ships. And they don't talk, the Church of Scientology doesn't talk about it like on their commercials. If Scientology TV did a thing on Marcab beam ships, I would have more respect for them. I have no respect, but they were honest about it. Anyway, thank you for listening. Jeffrey Augustine, Scientology Money Project on YouTube. See you next time.